Today's presentation is on power holders' perspectives on legitimacy. The content includes a dialogic approach to legitimacy, legitimation and legitimacy, the value of dialogic framework, power holders' legitimation and identity, legitimation through cultural symbols, legitimation through performance and office, integrating symbolic legitimation, performance legitimation and self-identity, power holders' self-perceptions of their authority and legitimacy, some empirical studies, and ethical failures of power holders. Max Weber suggested when power holders claim to exercise their legitimacy or legitimate authority, it begins with a dialogue. Past research has focused on perspectives of audience legitimacy, which is citizens or offenders, and not all power holders' view of legitimacy was ever studied. While having dialogues about legitimacy, it is important that power holders' voice is also considered. It can be useful to understand the power holders' voice that is within them and how it relates to the exercise of authority. To understand the perspective of power holders' voices in the dialogue, it is important to understand how do power holders legitimate their authority to others, and this was a study conducted by Bottoms and Tankebe in 2013. Additionally, how does the confidence of power holders in the legitimacy of their own authority work, both under confidence and overconfidence? A dialogic approach to legitimacy. So according to Sean McConkade in 2002, legitimacy is the recognition of the right to govern, and it encompasses both parties who exercise the power and on whom the power is exercised. Dialogue is therefore the central feature of legitimacy. According to Tyler, 2006, procedural justice is important when focusing on legitimacy. Citizens will regard power holders as legitimate if they are treated with respect and fairness. According to Tyler, Callahan, and Frost in 2007, procedurally just practices are also positively attributed to legitimacy by employees. According to Tom Tyler, 2011, every police force and public interaction must be treated as a socializing experience. The interaction can either build or undermine legitimacy. This should also equally apply to other criminal justice agencies. A single interaction can build or deteriorate legitimacy of power holders. Hence, the teachable moments should be taken into consideration from both power holders and citizens' viewpoints. Power holders cannot do their daily duties without the opinion and responses of their public, and according to Herbert 2006, self-separation is necessary to exercise authority responsibly. A sense of power or a sense of power holders' self-legitimacy is important for the stability and effectiveness of those in position of authority. Internal legitimacy can lead to disorganization of behavior and inability to perform assigned role. Max Weber stated power holders do not anticipate that citizens will obey them, either with material motives, emotional affinity, or ideal motives. Power holders can also claim and cultivate belief in their legitimacy, but power holders attempt to cultivate beliefs of their legitimacy among citizens. Power holders make claims to their legitimacy through claiming their belief their power is morally justified and they are servants of a larger collective system of values. The inner voice is the important principle or the principal matter of power holders' perception of legitimacy. However, not all power holders have the same inner beliefs and feelings in relation to the power assigned to them. Rodney Parker, 2001, argued legitimacy is an observable human activity in which rulers engage. It is characteristic of the government and power holders. He also argued legitimacy is an important property that is ascribed with a set of human relationships and that there is no such thing as legitimacy. He said the actions and language of people are described when speaking about legitimacy, hence, it is not any independent phenomenon. The distinction, however, between legitimation and legitimacy is that one is an act by a ruler who cultivates his or her right to rule, and the other is an attribute of power holder of the right to rule. And legitimacy does not have to be an independent phenomenon. It is the day-to-day flow of relationships between power holders and their audiences. So what is the value of dialogic framework? Legitimation of the power holder becomes clear when one section of the citizens criticize them while the other section of citizens express support. Criminal justice systems are shaped by governing community, and it legitimizes itself separate from legislative and executive branches of the government. Police chiefs need to legitimate themselves upwards toward the states and downwards to the citizens, while police officers doing their regular patrol are the lowest in the hierarchy, but they possess enormous power and daily engage in legitimacy dialogues with citizens. Hence, there are different power holders with different roles, and their legitimacy claims are being made to different audiences. Power holders also make claims, however, the claims to legitimacy are responded by audiences, which are sometimes favorably and sometimes not. Hence, power holders might adjust their claims to tailor it with the audience's response. Day-to-day conversations people routinely take into account does have an impact with how much or little one would trust the power holder. Identifying a set of normative requirements is a legitimate regime. Beetham in 1991 stated, "Each society has a different cultural setup, so is the criminal justice related legitimacy dialogues. However, there is a structure of audience legitimacy common to all societies." He found 3 dimensions, and that's of common legitimacy. One is legality, the other is shared value, and the last is consent. For considering legitimacy dialogue between power holder and audience, the context of the dialogue must be considered. It is particularly the strength of procedural justice that emphasizes equality. Dialogues are not universally applicable, whereas power holders are only effectively interested in power. A dialogue will then be dominated, can be seen by power holder as impossible or inappropriate. There are stances of power abuse, and the social interaction is viewed as us versus them. Dictatorial rules cannot be explained without referring to the absence of legitimacy dialogue. So Baker in 2001 developed from what Luckman in 1987 said, that during addressing legitimation, power holders are not only addressing audiences but are also speaking to themselves. Also, self-legitimation is also connected deeply to a person's identity as a power holder. Legitimation can be attempted by using symbols or rituals, and use of cultural symbols as legitimation, or the use of performance of duties as legitimation, and the legitimation as self-identity. So for legitimation through cultural symbols, Kurtzer in 1988 stated that power holders often use symbols and rituals like formal ceremonies to legitimate themselves in the eyes of relevant audiences, having a new self with getting a new occupation. With policing comes significant power, and not everyone will be comfortable with the new self. Acts of legitimation needs to be carried out to see legitimation in one's own eyes. Self-legitimation does exist, and acts of legitimation may occur privately through dinners or small ceremonies. The 2 types of cultural legitimation are symbols and rituals. Police have uniforms. Uniforms have utilitarian value, and it symbolizes status. Ceremonial occasions form symbolism. With symbols, people can create moral bonds. For legitimation through power and performance in office, Max Weber in 1922 stated dominating systems attempt to build belief in its legitimacy. Rodney Barker in 2001 asserted prestige is attached to the government and powerholders' acts are motivated for the prestige. According to Hind in 2007, humans have always lived in groups. Humans can be selfish or cooperative. However, humans need to develop themselves and social cooperation and retain from acts of selfishness. Hence, all human groups face a problem of order or governance. As order or governance has been necessary for human groups, some people become leaders in government or other public service. Prestige can be a motivation, but there may be other reasons for becoming a power holder. One of the ethnographic studies by Herbert in 2006 found that Seattle police legitimated themselves because of their functions. According to Dennis Wrong in 1995, power holders need to view themselves as serving a purpose. For people in the criminal justice system, that means maintaining the social order. Ineffectiveness in their work can negatively impact how they view their authority. Lastly, effective performance from power holders show their legitimacy to their audiences, but lack of effective performance, such as lack of security, can question the legitimacy. Effective performance fills a dual role in audience legitimacy and self-legitimacy. Integrating symbolic legitimation, performance legitimation, and self-identity, the symbolic and performance legitimation are both important in understanding the voice within the power holders, and both are related in development of self-identity. Symbolic legitimation, performance legitimation, and self-identity are connected, but no empirical evidence is available to support this claim. Legitimacy takes place when the power holder places legitimation through dialogue with whom the power holder claims legitimacy. Barker in 2001 pointed out the symbolic legitimation involves rituals that subjects may not associate themselves with, and it can create conflict with power holders' judgment in cultivation of legitimate relations between power holder and audience. Power holders' self-perceptions of their authority and legitimacy can be seen or can be understood by viewing the legitimacy through their self-confidence in their authority. But self-confidence can also be used as means of arrogance. Some empirical studies. A study by Sparks, Bottom, and Hay in 1996 in Albany, which is a high-security prison in England, where the staff experienced incidents of being trapped by prisoners and losing control of parts in the prison. The incidents led to loss of self-confidence amongst the staff. The staff were fearful and anxious. The new governor made new rules and added restrictions to the prisoners' freedom. The effect improved the staff's self-confidence. The restrictions were put in all units, including the Vulnerable Prisoner Unit, which is the VPU. Prisoners in the VPU were known to be compliant, but for consistency, their freedoms were restricted as well. Most staff supported the decision, while a minority of the officers did not. So, lack of self-confidence leads to keeping lack of order in prison, is what was found in the study. Also, legitimacy dialogue, when heavy in favors of power holder, power goes to the head and might get overused. Another study was conducted in Laconia, in the United States, which found that to be good officers or to be good police officers, one had to be successful with understanding human suffering and be able to resolve contradiction of achieving just ends with coercive means. Moore's findings include, so this study was conducted by William Kerr Moore in 1977, and The study also included that sometimes to make people do what they don't want to do, police officers have only their authority to achieve that objective. So whether police officers develop two important virtues of policing depends on how they handle critical incidents that challenges assumptions about human nature or notions of right or wrong. In Moore's analysis, four types of police officers emerges from his study who were separated on two matters: the capacity to integrate a degree of coercion into the moral approach and realistic understanding of human conditions. Two categories of officers were unable to integrate coercion into their moral stance: the reciprocator and the voider. The other two categories of officers are involved officers who included the use of force in an integrated way into their moral compass. Enforcers is one category who have limited understanding of human condition, and they tend to be aggressive and impatient. Such officers will reinforce suspicion and won't be able to take advantage of teachable moments. The last category of officers engage with their audiences through dialogues and established legitimacy. According to Moore, this type of officers comes closest to being an ideal police officer. The failings in Albany prison caused due to officers being the avoider, the reciprocator, and also the enforcer. A study in Ghana by Dr. Tankebi in 2007 showed the views of officers' legitimacy did not differ by gender or education, but by the length of service. The study found relations among officers between own and different ranks shaped their views about authority and legitimacy. Whether a police organization was effective or not was associated with an increased confidence in self-legitimacy. Procedural justice is a component of self-legitimacy. And to conclude this presentation, we will be finishing off with ethical failures by power holders. Philosopher J.R. Lucas in 1980 in his book said, "People learn about justice by focusing on its opposite, injustice." Power holders also make mistakes, but they cover up their mistakes with the language of authority itself. Ethical failures in leadership are not due to their will, but due to cognition. A self-justifying concept of having been entitled a special treatment, even to do an unusual act. Without exercising due diligence, power holders are conducive to ethical failure. Noble cause corruption is when police officers are tempted to accept special favors in situations or the justification of their breaches of law on grounds of their special role. When malpractice by police officers are observed by the public, it reduces audience legitimacy. However, ethical practices may fail the leaders, and they can mistakenly behave in ways that deviates from moral requirements. Authentic transformational leaders are altruists who are concerned about the collective good. As per Herbert's 2006, power holders need an element of self-separation of performing their tasks and responsiveness to shared values of their audiences, and this is to wrap up. Officers lacking confidence cannot claim authority properly. An officer with overconfidence can abuse power. Also, power holders with cognitive characteristics may lead to malpractice even by altruistic leaders who are neither over nor underconfident. Symbolic legitimation, performance legitimation, and self-identity of power holders can work reciprocally and appropriately together. Power holders will also take into account the responses of audiences, and that will allow him or her to adjust their legitimacy claim. As legitimacy dialogue has to be between both parties, power holders must be careful of their flamboyant actors of legitimation and cognitively motivated malpractice, and appropriate sensitivity to shared community values must be taken into consideration.